So I was trying to find some spooky games that I could play with my kids. In terms of film and literature, you have such a wide spectrum of horror, which allows you to explore the genre in a way that is completely within your control and comfort level. In gaming, it doesn't feel quite the same. You either have more gory survival horror or you have Mascot horror. Now, I do know that there are more ethereal and esoteric games like Yume Nikki, Omori, and World of Horror, but are we really going to pretend that a 10-year-old would really get those types of games without some sort of context of the tropes and the history of those, subgenres of horror? These are things that are normally taught and learned through the tropes of traditionally scary games, movies, and books. So with all of that spiraling or uzumaki in my head, yeah, shout out to the real ones who got that. In regards to playing scary games with my kids, I feel like I'm kind of personally relegated to Mascot horror, which is more often than not lumped in with children's horror. But is it really all as bad as most YouTubers say? Is the death of Mascot horror and its brother cousin analog horror due to pandering to children for easy cash? Or are you just starting to realize that you are getting old and that the younger generations just have different tastes than you?
I used to be with it, but then they changed what it was. Now what I'm with isn't it, and what's it seems weird and scary to me. It'll happen to you.
So with all of that foundational context poured out like concrete, let's talk about this fascinating genre that is often dismissed as mere child's play. So the way that I'm going to do this is we're going to talk about the current state of Mascot horror in relation to gaming. We're going to do a flashback sequence to the origin story of modern Mascot horror, then we're going to flash forward to the future. So this is totally in line with the narrative structure of your typical Mascot horror game, just to keep everything consistent, TV Tropes defines Mascot horror as a type of indie horror game popularized in the mid-2010s. Instead of masses of enemies, an intangible terror, or an actively horrific threat, the main terror is a recognizable corporeal character or group of characters who, with some defanging, could easily be the mascots of a children's media franchise, and often are in-universe. This mascot essentially serves as a mascot for the game too, always showing up on the cover art, contrasting greatly with the dark atmospheric cover art that most horror games have. In conjunction with this, add further allusions to the player's childhood by having references to recognizable childhood media, especially for late millennials or Gen Z players. Some tentpole staple foundational popular games in the genre include Bendy and the Ink Machine, FNAF aka Five Nights at Freddy's, Amanda the Adventure, Piggy, and my hot take that I don't plan on elaborating on, Doki Doki Literature Club. If you want a definition that's more in line with the current online opinion, here is Know Your Meme. Mascot horror is a subgenre of horror media that is primarily aimed at children and often features characters that are easily turned into merchandise. The distinct characteristics of the subgenre are toy-like villains, an abundance of jump scares, children being the primary audience, and pandering to YouTubers. The genre was spawned by the viral success of the Five Nights at Freddy's series created by Scott Cawthorn. And I don't blame them. Walk down the kids section of any store and all the toys are basically cheap toys modeled after these children horror games. It's hard to not feel cynical about the blatant cash grab and capitalism taking place for content that most people consider low effort. So first off, children's media in general has a pretty noble goal: to instill positive values through relatable and likable characters. But children's horror takes it up a notch, subverting two genres at once by showing that, hey, those monsters might be the good guys or just misunderstood. Take Paranorman, Monster High, Descendants, or Hotel Transylvania as prime examples. They flip the script on what's traditionally evil or scary, showing us that sometimes people act all villainous because, well, others were pretty villainous to them first. It doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it opens up the door for redemption and understanding. It's like a life lesson wrapped in spooky packaging, if you will. Unless you are Jaime Lannister, you just throw it all out the window at the last second. Now, Stephen King once said that we crave horror movies to prove that we're not afraid. And who more than children want to show off their bravery? They're basically tiny adrenaline junkies, right? So scary evil grannies or demonic Peppa Pigs, that's no problem. Bring it on. But what's truly intriguing about children's horror is the visual language it uses compared to traditional horror. Kids, bless their tiny little hearts, have very limited life experience, and I mean, honestly, thank God for that. So the way that they interpret and imagine the spooky stuff is nothing short of creative genius, and something that I think that we should be a lot more open to. Now, while most of the gameplay in these horror games might seem simplistic, the depth and obscurity of titles like Five Nights at Freddy's or FNAF for all the cool kids in MatPat let clever and motivated players dive into a darker, more thought-provoking narrative. It's like solving a puzzle wrapped in a jump-scare-filled nightmare. And also on top of that, you also have to remember that in order to get into these more deeper lore and deep mythology type of stories, you have to look for it. You have to sometimes break the game a little bit or find your own way to get into these stories. But let's rewind a bit in our horror history. Children's horror has been around forever, from folklore and mythology to books, movies, TV shows, comics, and now video games. Folklore and mythology were like the OG horror stories. They were dark, violent, and gruesome, but they also had a dash of humor, fantasy, and adventure. Some of the most famous examples of these stories are Grimm's fairy tales, which include classics like Hansel and Gretel, Little Red Riding Hood, and Snow White. Grimm's fairy tales were influenced by the social and political conditions of Germany in the 19th century, such as poverty, war, and disease. The stories often featured themes of survival, justice, and morality, as well as elements of magic, fantasy, and adventure. For hundreds, if not thousands of years, many kids' first exposures to the thrills and dangers of the outside world are rooted in light horror stories that tend to have a positive-ish ending. As print media became more popular, macabre stories began to gain more mainstream attention due to the proliferation of pulp stories. Pulp fiction, not the Tarantino one with the feet, but pulp fiction emerged as a popular form of entertainment in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when advances in printing technology and transportation made it possible to produce and distribute cheap magazines with colorful covers and, at the time, over-the-top sensational stories. How cheap were these books? Based on my research, they were sold for about 5 cents in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when pulp magazines first emerged as a popular form of entertainment. This was equivalent to about $1.50 in modern dollars. These magazines were often divided into genres such as adventure, romance, science fiction, and of course, fantasy and horror. Some of the most famous pulp horror writers include H.P. Lovecraft, Ray Bradbury, and Richard Matheson. Shout out to the original storyline for I Am Legend. Great book. Pulp fiction magazines reached their peak of popularity and influence in the 1930s and 40s, when they sold millions of copies every month and inspired many readers to become writers themselves. Some of the most successful pulp fiction magazines were Amazing Stories, Weird Tales, Astounding Stories, and as influential as these stories are, you'd think that they'd be able to come up with some better publication or omnibus names. Pulp fiction itself declined in the 50s and 60s due to several factors, such as the rise of television, comics, paperback books, and censorship. Many pulp fiction magazines ceased publication or switched to other formats, and by the time that they basically came out of fashion, they were being sold for about 25 cents a pop, which is equivalent to about $2.40 in modern American dollar dues. That kind of public accessibility was unparalleled at the time, and even if we didn't have the internet, it'd be just as impressive now as it was then. Now we're starting to hit the beginnings of hyper-consumerism, consumption, and capitalism of the 80s, 90s, and early aughts. I use that word on purpose just to show you how old I am. This is when we first started getting, I think, the first wave of Mascot horror. In 1988, the world was introduced to Charles Lee Ray, more colloquially known as Chucky. Interestingly, the screenwriter of the film, Don Mancini, drew inspiration from the consumerism of the 1980s and the profound impact of marketing on children. His experiences with his father, an advertising executive, played a significant role in shaping his creative direction. It's worth noting that, perhaps not by irony, but certainly by coincidence, both Slappy and Chucky found their origins in a 1978 film called Magic. This film starred Anthony Hopkins, and its eerie tale revolved around a ventriloquist dummy named Fats, who gradually developed a murderous personality. For our video, Slappy stands out as a prime example as he epitomizes the very metaphor we're discussing. Slappy essentially serves as the face of the Goosebumps series. While my personal favorites lean more towards the realm of cosmic horror, Slappy's iconic status effortlessly connects with people of my generation. He's a pop culture figure so recognizable that he can be slapped, no pun intended, onto a t-shirt or utilized in a peculiar set of bumper stickers, even if the message might leave you a little bit confused if you looked at it a little bit too deeply. Younger generations might associate Mascot horror with films like Dead Silence, which is inadvertently highlighting the very point that we're making. Children's horror films like Coraline, Nightmare Before Christmas, Paranorman, and Monster House excel in introducing the eerie and suspenseful tropes reminiscent of classic creature features. In contrast, productions like Spirited Away, along with shows like Stranger Things and Over the Garden Wall, master the art of providing slow burn experiences for younger audiences.
Well, I just wanted to take a quick second to say thank you for, stopping by my video. Being a horror fan, being a parent is very weird. Sometimes it's just like a lot of justification of liking really, really, really weird stuff, And yeah, I mean, I do like a lot of gaming and stuff like that, but if you want more content like this, like, subscribe, do all the YouTube things, share it with other like-minded parents. Did you know that it gives you a little reward if you click the thumbs up button? It does a little pachoo. So, yeah, try that shit, hit that shit, do it right now.
What I find truly fascinating about media is that each medium possesses its own set of advantages and limitations, which significantly influence how stories are presented and perceived. Print media, for instance, offers intricate details and descriptions, but it relies on the reader's imagination to bring the narrative to life. Visual media, such as movies and TV shows, can conjure up realistic and immersive experiences, yet they must adhere to the specific rules and conventions that are specific to the medium of film. On the other hand, interactive media such as video games strike a unique balance by merging the strengths of both print and visual media. Moreover, it grants players a level of choice and agency unparalleled by other formats. Slappy, Chucky, Freddy, and Jason-y, and every other iconic horror figure you can conjure are all intertwined with the realm of Mascot horror. It's intriguing because horror icons like Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees are typically categorized as Mascot horror in the same vein as characters from games, yet there are underlying connections worth exploring. Traditional horror icons, those menacing villains or whatever descriptor fits, can be seen as mascots for their respective franchises. They serve as the faces that haunt our dreams, becoming inseparable from the lore that they inhabit. Beneath it all, the true horror often lies in the clutches of capitalism. Over the years, characters like Chucky, Pinhead, and Leatherface have been thrust into various forms of merchandise, action figures, clothing, and collectibles. While not as child-friendly as traditional mascot characters, these horror icons have been marketed and merchandised in a manner akin to the broad commercialization of modern mascot horror. And then we have the journey from terror to inevitable satire. As these characters become woven in our cultural fabric, they often venture into the realms of satire and parody. For instance, Freddy Krueger from the Nightmare on Elm Street series lost some of his scariness through appearances in parodies like Freddy vs. Jason and comedy shows like Robot Chicken.
Aw, where the hell's my sweater?
Chill out, it's in the dryer.
You fool! The label clearly says permanent press!
Scary Terry from Rick and Morty is also another good example of this. These portrayals took the edge off Freddy's nightmarish persona, making it difficult for audiences to view him as truly terrifying. How can you be scared of the Raisin Man who plays pinball with a giant hockey himbo? What was initially terrifying now verged on humor and absurdity. Crossovers and parodies introduced horror characters to audiences not typically engaging with horror content. And in these moments, they revealed the mundane aspects of a character's origin or abilities. This demystification diluted the enigmatic and horrifying qualities of the character. In this vein, parody reduces their scariness. Then there's the Minecraft effect. This particular phenomenon which sees gamers expressing rage and frustration at whatever is currently popular amongst children, regardless of how groundbreaking the concept or the game may be. I think it's a pretty good snapshot of where we stand today. What initially drew me into Mascot Mascot Horror is its knack for unraveling the juxtaposition between revisiting media from your youth as an adult. It invites us to look back at seemingly random childhood moments and realize the darker undercurrents that enriched our youthful joys. Mascot Horror enables us to empathize with the innocence of our youth while acknowledging the morbid and dark realities that come with age and experience. Embracing Mascot Horror doesn't diminish your status as a horror fan. On the contrary, it opens up doors to a more open-minded and curious exploration of the diverse ways horror can be expressed. In the ever-evolving medium of gaming, Mascot Horror challenges our expectations and tugs at our emotions. It exposes the sinister facets of innocence, nostalgia, and consumerism, all while prompting us to question the trust that we invest in authority figures and institutions. Criticizing Mascot Horror is akin to turning down a perfectly delicious cheeseburger while proclaiming a preference for gourmet cuisine. When executed thoughtfully and intentionally, it's a genre that respects its audience's boundaries and offers a safe thrill ride for the younger crowd. Who knows, perhaps Mascot Horror will be the bridge guiding future horror enthusiasts from Freddy Fazbear to Freddy Krueger. So let's not underestimate the power of spooky animatronics and cute but terrifying mascots. So as you can see, I definitely am of the opinion that Mascot Horror transcends various forms of media, but it's currently getting its time in the world of video games. In a JoJo-esque twist of fate, the current mascot of Mascot Horror is without a doubt Five Nights at Freddy's, or FNAF in short. Five Nights at Freddy's is a video game series brought to life by Scott Cawthon in 2014, and it's now about to be a Hollywood feature film produced by freaking Jason Blum. In the famous words of Yogurt from Spaceballs, and
merchandising, where the real money from the movie is made. Spaceballs the t-shirt, Spaceballs the coloring book, Spaceballs the lunchbox, Spaceballs the breakfast cereal, Spaceballs the flamethrower. The kids love this one.
Within the eerie corridors of the original Five Nights at Freddy's game, players assume the role of a night guard tasked with safeguarding a pizzeria haunted by animatronic creatures that come to life after hours, all of them harboring sinister designs to take the player's life. While the game's jump scares garnered attention, it was the ardent fan theory community that unearthed the potential for a hidden narrative lying just beneath the surface. Getting into this buried lore requires a healthy dose of detective work. Fans dig deep, decoding cryptic messages and examining game files and pixels, all in pursuit of the elusive morsels of story. Once this puzzle begins to take shape, though, the tale itself unfurls, revealing elements of betrayal, capitalism, and greed embodied by characters like William Afton, the enigmatic Purple Man, and the infamous Bite of 87. Somewhat off topic, but I think it's worth noting, is that Mascot Horror in gaming evolved alongside the resurgence of analog horror, another genre that's seeing enduring popularity and now a lot of postmodern criticism. These two genres share several reoccurring themes. The uncanny valley, that discomforting sensation when something appears almost human but retains an unsettling otherness. It's the stuff of nightmares, whether in the form of eerie, out-of-place rooms or anthropomorphic animatronics. The nostalgia factor, the juxtaposition of nostalgia with sinister or disturbing content. Children today develop nostalgia for things that are merely a few years old, and that's honestly understandable considering that a few years still constitutes a significant chunk of their lifetimes. There's the mystery element, crafting narratives filled with cryptic messages, hidden clues, or unresolved plot lines. This itself invites curiosity, which is stoking intrigue and paranoia amongst its audience. And there's also the meta aspect, an implicit awareness that the media isn't what it seems, often hiding a hidden agenda or purpose. This involves breaking the fourth wall, employing self-referentiality, or manipulating the audience's perception. While this is something that's obviously a lot harder for younger audiences to pick up, if they have basically taken in enough tropes within things like Mascot Horror, they can start to kind of recognize these patterns of storytelling. Mascot Horror Despite its current association with jump scares and shallow lore about malevolent spirits, it really has the potential to evolve into a formidable subgenre within the gaming world. It shares many characteristics with the broader horror genre, meaning it can grow, mature, and draw inspiration from both new and time-honored sources. Mascot Horror provides a unique entry point into the world of horror for younger audiences, much like its fictional counterparts such as Goosebumps, Stranger Things, and Coraline. These stories are designed to help young minds navigate the complexities of fear, curiosity, and imagination while keeping their explorations safe and engaging. What makes this subgenre particularly appealing is its capacity to serve as a controlled introduction to horror. Its content is tailored to a youthful demographic with limited life experiences and a developing understanding of a whole genre within itself, horror. The beauty of this approach lies in its ability to allow young individuals to flirt with fear within familiar and safe confines. Not all Mascot Horror intends to be dissected intellectually or taken seriously. It aims to offer thrilling, fun experiences while keeping young audiences within their comfort zones. The potential of Mascot Horror is, in my opinion, quite undeniable. It can contribute to the growth of horror as a whole, all while nurturing the interests of the upcoming generation of horror enthusiasts. It's a genre that should continue to honor the intelligence, boundaries, and limitations of its audience, ensuring that young horror fans can indulge in spine-tingling adventures without exposing themselves to content that may be too disturbing or harmful. In the evolving landscape of horror, the seemingly innocent and smiling faces of mascots may very well harbor the next generation of fear, fascination, and imaginative storytelling.
Okay, so yeah, that was my video. Just me kind of trying to unpack it. A much shorter video than I normally do, but you know, just trying to do different things, see what you guys like. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know about horror movies or games or just like horror experiences that you have done with your kids or that you would do with your kids, you know. I want to learn. I really want to introduce my kids to horror. They're all still very young, but yeah, that's future goals, you know. So yeah, once again, if you like what I'm doing, if you're picking up what I'm putting down, like, subscribe, comment, share, converse in the comments. So yeah, thank you again, and don't gatekeep. Also, do you feel like my opinions about everything are wrong? Do you think I have terrible takes? Do you think I have just terrible taste in games? Just leave a comment down below. Let me know. And then other people leave comments in response to that one and engage with each other. And do that in the comments.